Hi, and welcome to today's Q&A session of PianoTV. So what we do in this monthly series is we take a look at 4 of your questions that you guys have asked, and I try to answer them as best as I can. So there's kind of a couple themes in today's episode. We're going to be talking about music books and choosing them, and then the other 2 questions are going to be addressing fast playing and practice techniques to get your playing quickly. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first question, they're saying they're a complete beginner. I'm willing to spend 10 years or more to become an expert. Can you please tell me the books you need to learn for each level of the Royal Conservatory of Music? This is a great question, and it's one that I get asked a lot. So that's part of the reason I really wanted to address today. The problem and the blessing at the same time is that there are so many options of books to choose, which is good and bad. Bad because that can make it really overwhelming. So first, I want to share with you some videos I've done related to this topic, and then I'll share some additional insights that might give you a little bit of guidance. So I'll make sure to have everything linked so you can check these out and get more details, but I've done videos on these in the past. So I have the best piano books for beginners. It's one of the earliest videos on the channel, but my recommendations would still more or less be the same. So in that video, I discuss about 10 of my favorite books for this level. I talk about why they're my favorite books. And basically the idea is that you could pick 2 or 3 from this list. I mean, you obviously don't need 10 books. And then there's the grade 1 piano version. It's the same idea, except these books are obviously going to be a little more challenging. So if you spent about 6 months with the beginner level books, you'd probably be ready to check out most of these. And then I have my favorite grade 2 books. Again, it's the same idea. When you've worked on grade 1 level pieces for 6 months to a year, this is a good batch of books to flip through. Again, you really only need to pick 2 or 3 from the list, like enough to cover a few different genres like Baroque and Classical, Romantic and Modern, and so forth. The best piano books for grade 3 is the most recent of the series, and again, it just follows the same format as the others, so be sure to check those out. I think those lists should give you a good start, and of course, I'll make more of those lists in the future as this channel develops. A lot of the time, what people will do is they'll simply get the Royal Conservatory of Music books, or, the ABRSM books, whatever music school, they usually have their own books. And this is a really foolproof way of progressing through the levels because each book has everything at that level. There's not really a lot of thought involved. You can buy a book and work through it even without a teacher. The main reason that that's not my favorite approach is just because I'm a book collector at heart. I would much rather have an album by Schumann than some random hodgepodge of pieces. But it really does have its place, and I'm not trying to push my agenda on you. I just really like to collect books. So that's an option for you. So the second question is, can I ask what you think I should do after I've completed my adult lesson books? I've done both the adult Faber books as well as level 4 and 5, which is as far as they go. So should I keep studying scales, arpeggios, composition, more challenging pieces, and so forth? For those not familiar with Piano Adventures, this is what the books look like. It's a really awesome series, and it's the series that I use in my studio with basically every person, adult, young, old, etc. So the 4th and 5th books that you mentioned are actually pretty high level. I think they're pretty challenging. And this is just kind of the breakdown of how I equate it with the Royal Conservatory and ABRSM levels, just to give you a rough idea. So by the time my students are at that 3A level, I usually start them in grade 1 material, and then 4 with grade 2, and then 5 with grade 3. So once you're done those and you're ready to branch out, my first suggestion would be to check out the grade 2 or the grade 3 book list that I mentioned in the previous question and see what kind of books you can find in there, because that should be about the right level. You could also try exploring some grade 4 music too. It just really depends on how comfortable you are with reading and the basic skills. Another option would be to check out the official syllabus, which I'll link to on the blog. Basically, they have a giant list of pieces in every possible category that you can imagine. So if I'm in the level 3 category, you can kind of see they have Baroque music and pieces that are at a grade 3 level. They have classical music, they have modern music, just a little bit of everything. The syllabus is my holy grail just because it's so comprehensive. And I'm a little bit of a nerd, I admit it. So I have a lot of fun exploring these books. I like listening to some of the pieces on YouTube to see what sounds fun, what my students might like, and that might be something you want to check out as well. The third question is, can you do a tutorial on how to do runs on the piano, as in play fast? Yes, I can. This is a question that we could talk about for hours, but I'll try to keep it relatively brief. So by runs on the piano, I assume you mean things like scales, arpeggios, cadenzas, and that kind of thing. So there's 2 things I usually do when I'm practicing to accomplish these fast passages. So the first one is to just make little incremental gains every day. So what I'll do is I'll play the run or whatever it is. I've actually got a piece in front of me by Czerny, and it's super, super fast. It's Vivace. So I'm going to just count this as like a run for the demonstration. So I'll figure out what speed I can play it at that doesn't make me feel like I'm bracing myself, like a speed that feels pretty comfortable. So when I'm starting out, maybe that speed feels pretty easy to me, and that's about 70 beats per minute. So what I'll actually do is I'll practice that with the metronome until it's really easy. And maybe I'll spend like 5 to 10 minutes doing this, but it's important that you're playing at a speed where you don't feel like you're making mistakes. Usually, like, you could, if it's a line or two of music, I'm just showing you a couple bars, but I would do this for a couple lines at a time, maybe. Maybe spend 5 to 10 minutes on that in a practice session. So then the next day, you review it at the same speed. So in my case, it's 70. I would play through it at 70 again, make sure I can still do it. Then what I'll do is I'll bump up the tempo, usually by like a small amount, like 5 beats per minute. In this case, since I'm going pretty slow, a 5 beat increase is actually pretty significant. It's going to make it quite a bit harder, but I'll see if I can do it. And it still feels comfortable and it still feels natural at that speed. So I would keep working through it at that tempo. And then day by day, I'll keep bumping up the tempo bit by bit in like 5 to 10 minute practice sessions. And eventually, in a few weeks to a month, you'll have it where it needs to be. You'll have it up to speed just with these small incremental gains. It seems like a long time, but I feel like it gives it a really good end result. It's a solid way to learn through it so that you're not... So when you get to the end result, you don't feel like you're falling apart as you're playing it. One thing I want to say, maybe you've got it pretty fast. Like, I'm just gonna, I don't know. Maybe I can play it at 145. I don't know if I can. Let's see what happens. So maybe I feel like once I can play it at 145, that's okay. But if I speed it up a little bit, then it starts like falling apart a little bit. And no matter what I do, I can't seem to speed it up without like my fingers flying away on me. If this happens, it's like this is just a wall that you're hitting, and it's really, really common. Don't feel like you have to always speed up every single day. If you're hitting one of these walls, the best thing you can do is just kind of like to sit at that tempo, really relax there for a few days until you feel like you can move forward again. That's just a kind of inevitable part of the learning process. Basically, what you want to do is find a balance between pushing yourself just a little bit so that you're not like falling asleep, but you don't want to push yourself so hard that your playing turns into like a sloppy mess. Okay, so the second thing is speeding up tiny sections at a time. This is like my other speed technique, and I feel like it works really, really good for some pieces. Just kind of like a micromanaging technique. So say your run is, I don't know, 4 bars long. Then what I would do is I would actually just work on 1 bar at a time, or maybe even less. It depends on how many notes there are. So 1 bar of this run that I've been working on, that's 1 bar, okay? So what I would do is I would spend 5 to 10 minutes only working on just that bar. And I'll actually memorize it too, because memorizing 1 bar of music isn't too difficult. If you can't memorize it after 5 to 10 minutes, maybe you even need to shrink what you're working on even smaller, because you should be able to put that in your memory. And then within 5 to 10 minutes, you should actually be able to get it up to speed or like really, really close, just kind of micromanaging it. So I'm just going to show you that in action here. Anyway, so you kind of get the idea. I'm not just going to sit and do that for 10 minutes, but that is one thing that you can do to speed it up. And then the next day, you'll have to come back to it. Maybe you won't be able to do it as fast right off the bat, but after a couple minutes, you should be able to get it fast again. And then you can do the same thing with the next bar, which in my case would be that. So you could, then work on that for 5 to 10 minutes. And now that I've done 2 bars because it's the second day. And then what I would do at the end of the 2 bars is I would put it together and practice bridging them now. And so on. And again, I'm not just going to sit here and practice for 5 hours, but that's kind of the zone that I would be getting into. And this isn't an instant process. Like, it usually takes a couple weeks to iron out all the kinks of it, but I find it to be really, really beneficial. And the last question today, how does one approach repeated duo intervals in a fast manner? So for example, Chopin's Nocturne Opus 15 number 1 in the B section with alternating sixths. So I've tried using pure fingers, but there's no way to get it up to speed without pain. Another good example would be Chopin's Heroic Polonaise left-hand octaves at full speed. So we'll get into this a little bit. Hopefully I can help. For starters, I want to say this is a difficult piece. It's an RCM grade 10 level, and I've also never learned it through. I'm familiar with it. And I assume what you mean by pure fingers is basically just following what the editor tells you to do with your fingers. So that would be my first suggestion if you're not already doing that. Like, always try the finger patterns the way they're suggested by a professional first before you kind of make your own way. And in this case, I think in my edition, we've got something like this for the first notes. So 1 and 4 and 2 and 5. So that would be like the pure fingers. Okay, so there's generally a couple causes of pain when we play piano, and the first one I want to address just to make sure is poor posture. So I'm going to assume that's not your problem, but just make sure your wrist is level with your forearm, it's not dipping or rising too high. You also want to make sure you're sitting far enough away that that your elbow is like not squished or kind of at an awkward angle. It should be kind of right by your side. So assuming that you're doing all of that, the reason that we get pain at the piano is from tension. It's really, really difficult to play fast passages without tension, because the tendency is going to be, so here's your pattern. The tendency is going to be for your hand to seize up and kind of turn into a claw. And the idea is to try to keep the hand as relaxed as possible, which is, I'm aware it's much easier to say that than to actually do that. So tension and hand fatigue is often the product of playing something too long. So it's like say you were doing chin-ups and you've never done chin-ups before. And the first chin-up might be okay, but as you do more reps, your muscles are going to start getting tighter. It feels like you have to fight through gravity to like rise yourself up, and your muscles are working against you because it's just a little bit too difficult. And it's the same with piano. It's possible that your piano muscles aren't buff enough for this passage. Like, you might find that your fingers, after even 30 seconds, you're rolling through this, you're practicing the pattern, and even after 30 seconds, they're getting tense when you play it fast. That's pretty normal, and you'll find that the more you kind of just do like it in 30-second bursts, maybe one day you can do it at 40 seconds, maybe one day you can do it at a minute. And I don't think that you'll ever I think it would be a really big stretch to say that you could like do the same repetitive pattern for 10 minutes with no pain. I think that at some point you're going to hit like a breaking point with it. But that's just something to think about. So if I'm working on really fast and awkward passages like that, and my hand's getting tense after 30 seconds, I just stop practicing fast for a few minutes. So if this is my pattern, I'm like, and I'm working on it and I'm starting to get tense, then I take a small break. Maybe I keep working on it, but I play it slowly and I keep it relaxed, and I'm maybe working on rotating my wrist a little bit. And once I feel like I've recovered my stamina, I start playing fast again for another 30 seconds and so forth. If you give yourself lots of rest this way, you should experience much less pain and hopefully none. And maybe next week or next month, you'll have better endurance and maybe you can play for a minute. So you basically just need to give your hands plenty of time to adapt to these really bizarre micro movements that we sometimes have to do in piano. And that's all for today's question and answer session. As I always say at the end of these videos, if you guys have any like pressing questions that you want to ask, any problems that you're having, whether it's like a really general, broad problem or like a hyper specific one, feel free to ask. I do like reading through them, and I refer to these videos to kind of select a batch of questions to address in June's question and answer session. So yeah, that would be awesome. So thank you so much for watching this video. Give it a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't already. And thank you for everyone who helps make these videos possible. You guys, I love when you guys share these videos and when you comment on them and all that good stuff. So catch you next time. So we'll make sure to have everything linked. Oh, sorry, earthquake.